Zak Bagans doesn't scare easily. 2 decades investigating the paranormal, hundreds of haunted locations, provoking spirits in asylums and prisons, spending nights where people died violently. He's built a career on fearlessness, but there's one case he admits still terrifies him. One investigation that crossed from entertainment to genuine threat. One location that left permanent scars on everyone who entered. For years, Zak stayed silent. He'd deflect questions, change subjects, avoid details, because talking about it, he says, stirs things up, brings it back, makes the nightmares return. But he's finally opened up about the case that changed everything, where people got hurt, where crew members quit, where Zak destroyed the location rather than risk anyone else experiencing what he witnessed. This is the Demon House investigation, the case that cost him his eyesight, the haunting that proved some places are evil beyond what cameras can capture. The house at 3860 Carolina Street in Gary, Indiana became nationally known in 2014 when reports of demonic possession emerged that were so extreme, so well documented by credible witnesses that they made international headlines. This wasn't your typical ghost story. Multiple families, multiple witnesses, medical professionals, police officers, and social workers all reported experiencing or witnessing phenomena that defied rational explanation. The core story centered on LaToya Ammons and her 3 children who rented the house in late 2011. What started as strange occurrences, footsteps, shadows, swarms of flies in winter, escalated into full-blown terror. The children exhibited behavior that their mother and witnesses described as possession, walking backward up walls, speaking in deep, inhuman voices, becoming violent with superhuman strength, eyes rolling back, convulsions, the kind of things that sound like horror movie fiction, except they were documented by people who had nothing to gain from lying. What made this case unique was the witness credibility. A registered nurse at a hospital where one of the children was examined wrote in official medical records that she witnessed the child walk backward up a wall. A Department of Child Services caseworker reported seeing phenomena she couldn't explain. Gary police officers filed reports describing encounters with what they believed were demonic entities. These weren't paranormal enthusiasts or attention seekers. These were professionals who risked their careers and reputations by going on record. The case attracted national media attention. News outlets sent reporters to investigate. Paranormal researchers documented the phenomena, and eventually, Zak Bagans heard about it. For someone who'd built his career on investigating the most haunted locations in America, this seemed like the Holy Grail. A case with credible witnesses, official documentation, and claims of demonic activity that went beyond typical haunting reports. It was everything he'd been searching for. Evidence that the demonic was real, documentable, and provable. In January 2014, Zak made a decision that would haunt him for years. He bought the house, not to live in, not as an investment, but as the centerpiece of a documentary that would, he hoped, provide definitive proof of demonic possession. He paid $35,000 in cash, sight unseen, and immediately began planning an investigation that would be more comprehensive, more scientific, more documented than anything Ghost Adventures had attempted. He wanted to capture what happened in that house. He wanted evidence that would convince skeptics. He wanted to prove the demonic was real. But from the moment Zak took ownership, things started going wrong. Equipment malfunctioned in ways that veteran crew members had never experienced. People who entered the house reported feeling ill, experiencing sudden personality changes, having violent impulses. One crew member quit before filming even began, saying the house made him feel suicidal. These weren't dramatic claims for attention. These were experienced professionals who'd investigated hundreds of locations walking away because something about this house felt genuinely dangerous. Zak later admitted he ignored the warnings. He'd spent years investigating haunted places without serious consequences. He thought he understood the risks, thought he could handle whatever was in that house, thought that with proper precautions and experienced crew, they could document the demonic without becoming victims of it. He was wrong, catastrophically, devastatingly wrong, and the price for that arrogance would be paid by everyone involved in the investigation. When Zak Bagans and his crew entered the Demon House for the first investigation, they brought everything: multiple camera systems, audio recording equipment, EMF detectors, thermal imaging, motion sensors. They also brought a priest for blessing and protection, a psychic medium to assess the spiritual atmosphere, and a demonologist who'd studied cases of possession for decades. They weren't taking chances, or so they thought. The house itself was unimpressive from the outside. Small, run-down, indistinguishable from hundreds of other working-class homes in Gary, Indiana. But inside, Zak said, the atmosphere was immediately oppressive, not cold, which is what paranormal investigators typically report in haunted locations. This was heavy, like pressure pushing down from all directions. Several crew members reported difficulty breathing. Others felt sudden overwhelming anger or sadness with no apparent cause. The investigation followed standard Ghost Adventures protocols initially. EMF sweeps to detect electromagnetic anomalies, thermal imaging to capture temperature variations, EVP sessions attempting to communicate with whatever entities might be present. But within the first hour, things started happening that weren't standard at all. Equipment began malfunctioning simultaneously. Cameras that had been working perfectly outside died the moment they entered certain rooms. Batteries drained instantly despite being fully charged minutes before. Then came the physical manifestations. Crew members reported being touched, pushed, scratched by invisible forces. One investigator collapsed suddenly, conscious but unable to move or speak for several minutes. When he recovered, he had no memory of what happened, but reported feeling like something had been inside him, controlling him. The medical evaluation later showed no physical cause for the collapse, no seizure, no stroke, no medical explanation, just sudden loss of bodily control that resolved as mysteriously as it began. But the incident that shook Zak most during that first investigation involved the demonologist they'd brought for expertise and protection. Father Michael, a Catholic priest with decades of experience performing exorcisms, entered the basement where much of the reported demonic activity had occurred. He began prayers of blessing, standard procedure for sanctifying a space. Within minutes, his demeanor changed completely. His voice dropped to a guttural growl. His eyes, witnesses reported, went black, and he lunged at Zak with clear, violent intent. It took 3 men to restrain Father Michael. He was fighting with strength that seemed impossible for a man his age and size, screaming in languages that those present didn't recognize. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Father Michael collapsed, exhausted, with no memory of what had happened. When shown footage of his behavior, he wept. Said in 40 years of dealing with the demonic, he'd never been overcome like that. Never lost control, never felt something take him over so completely and so quickly. That incident changed the entire investigation. This wasn't going to be a standard Ghost Adventures episode where they captured some EVPs and thermal anomalies. This was actively dangerous. Whatever was in that house wasn't just present. It was aggressive, intelligent, and powerful enough to overcome even people who'd spent their lives fighting demonic forces. Zak made the decision to continue, but with enhanced protocols. More protection, more precautions, shorter exposure times for crew members. But the damage he'd later realize was already done. The moment they entered that house, something attached itself to the investigation, and it wasn't going to let go. Over the weeks of investigation, the demon house stopped being just a location and became something more like a living, malevolent presence that seemed to target anyone who entered. Crew members started experiencing problems that extended beyond the investigation periods. Nightmares, sleep paralysis, sudden health issues with no medical explanation, relationships falling apart, financial disasters. One cameraman reported that his previously happy marriage dissolved into constant fighting within days of filming at the house. Zak himself began experiencing phenomena that terrified him. He'd wake up unable to move, feeling pressure on his chest, seeing shadow figures in his room. Equipment in his own home began malfunctioning, and then came the physical symptoms. His vision started deteriorating in ways that doctors couldn't explain. He developed diplopia, permanent double vision, that required him to wear prism glasses for the rest of his life. Medical examinations found no cause, no injury, no disease, no genetic condition. His eyes had simply stopped working correctly. Zak has been adamant in interviews that his vision problems are directly connected to the demon house. He points out the timing, the sudden onset during filming, the lack of medical explanation. Skeptics argue correlation doesn't prove causation, that medical issues can develop spontaneously. But Zak knows what he experienced, and the vision damage is permanent, undeniable proof that something happened to him during that investigation, something that left lasting physical harm. But the scariest incidents didn't happen to Zak. They happened to people who were just doing their jobs, who had no belief in the paranormal, who were simply working on a film production. A local man hired to help with some repairs at the house became violently ill after spending a few hours there. He ended up hospitalized with organ failure that doctors couldn't explain, recovered eventually but never fully, and he swears to this day that something in that house attached itself to him and tried to kill him. Then there was the incident that almost made Zak shut down the entire production. A crew member, we'll call him Chris, was alone in the house for less than 5 minutes setting up equipment. When the team returned, they found him sitting on the floor, staring at nothing, unresponsive. When he finally snapped out of it, he reported that time had passed differently for him. What felt like minutes to everyone else felt like hours to Chris. And during that time, he said, something had shown him things, visions of violence, death, evil, beyond description. He quit that day, refused to return, refused to even discuss what he'd seen. The psychological toll on the entire crew became evident. People who'd worked on ghost adventures for years, who'd investigated hundreds of locations without issue, started showing signs of serious trauma, anxiety, depression, paranoia. Some sought therapy, others turned to medication. The production insurance company actually pulled coverage partway through filming because they deemed the location too dangerous. That's unprecedented in television production. Insurance companies don't walk away from profitable shows without serious cause. Zak realized too late that he'd unleashed something he couldn't control. This wasn't a haunting you could document and walk away from. This was an active, intelligent force that was hurting people, and he felt responsible. Every person who got sick, every crew member who had nightmares, every life that was disrupted, it was because Zak had bought that house and brought people into contact with whatever evil lived there. That guilt, he's admitted, weighs on him more than any ghost ever could. The Demon House documentary was eventually completed and released in 2018, 4 years after Zak bought the property. But what most viewers don't know is how much footage didn't make it into the final cut. Not because it wasn't compelling, but because it was too disturbing, too real, too potentially harmful to broadcast. Zak has hinted in interviews about footage that even he won't watch anymore. Recordings from that house that show things he wishes he'd never captured. Audio recordings from the basement captured voices that sound undeniably inhuman, not the whispered EVPs that paranormal shows typically feature. Clear, loud voices speaking in what linguists identified as ancient languages, saying things that, when translated, were threats, warnings, promises of violence. One audio clip allegedly captured something claiming to be a demon that had been at that location for centuries, feeding on the misery of families who lived there. Video footage showed phenomena that defied explanation, objects moving on their own, not the subtle shifts that can be explained by vibration or air movement, large items lifting and flying across rooms, doors slamming with enough force to crack frames, and in one particularly disturbing sequence, a shadow figure that appeared to have human-like form but moved in ways that violated physics, crawling on walls, twisting at impossible angles, moving so fast it appeared as a blur even on high-speed cameras. But the footage that apparently disturbed Zak most involved the possessions. Multiple people caught on camera undergoing what appeared to be genuine demonic influence, eyes rolling back, bodies contorting, voices changing, speaking in languages they didn't know. And unlike Hollywood dramatizations, these were real people, not actors, experiencing genuine terror. One woman who agreed to be interviewed about her experiences in the house began showing signs of possession during filming. Her segment had to be stopped when she became violent, requiring multiple people to restrain her. Zak has said that watching that footage back was one of the hardest things he's ever done, seeing someone he'd brought into that environment being hurt, being overtaken by something evil, knowing he was responsible for putting her in that situation. The woman recovered after prayers and spiritual intervention, but she sued the production, claiming the experience left her with lasting psychological trauma. The case was settled out of court. Details remain confidential, but Zak has said publicly that he doesn't blame her. He'd put her in harm's way pursuing evidence of the paranormal. She paid the price. Perhaps most disturbing were the recordings that captured things happening when nobody was in the house. Motion-activated cameras caught figures moving through rooms. Thermal imaging showed heat signatures that appeared and disappeared without corresponding physical presence. And audio recorders left running overnight captured hours of sounds, footsteps, voices, screams, furniture being moved. When crew members reviewed the footage the next morning, the house appeared undisturbed. Nothing physically moved, but the audio and video evidence showed activity that lasted all night. The evidence collected at the Demon House, Zak has said, is the most compelling he's ever captured. It's proof, as much as proof can exist, that demonic forces are real and can interact with the physical world. But it's proof that came at too high a cost. Proof that required people to suffer. Proof that Zak wishes he'd never sought because the price of knowing, of proving, was too high. Some mysteries he learned aren't worth solving. Some evidence isn't worth the lives it damages in the collection. After months of investigation, after witnessing people get hurt, after his own health deteriorated, Zak Bagans made a decision that shocked the paranormal community. He was going to destroy the Demon House, not sell it, not turn it into a tourist attraction or museum exhibit like his haunted artifacts. Destroy it completely. Eliminate the location so nobody else could be harmed by whatever evil inhabited that property. The decision wasn't easy. From a business perspective, it was insane. The house had become internationally famous. Paranormal tourists would have paid significant money to tour it. Other paranormal shows were requesting permission to investigate. Zak could have made substantial profit from that property for years, but he couldn't ethically justify allowing more people to be exposed to what he'd experienced. Couldn't risk more injuries, more possessions, more lives being destroyed by whatever demonic presence lived there. In January 2016, 2 years after purchasing the property, Zak had the demon house demolished. Professional demolition crew, not just tearing it down but grinding the debris, removing every piece of the structure, treating the site like a toxic waste cleanup. The crew reported feeling uncomfortable during the demolition. Equipment broke down repeatedly. Workers reported feeling watched, feeling oppressed, but eventually the house was gone, reduced to rubble and hauled away. But destroying the physical structure didn't end the haunting. Zak has admitted that even after the house was demolished, he continued experiencing phenomena. The nightmares continued, his vision problems persisted and worsened, and he carried a sense of dread, a feeling that something from that house was still attached to him, that by investigating it, by owning it, by spending so much time in its presence, he'd created a connection that destroying the building couldn't sever. Other people involved in the investigation reported similar ongoing issues. Years after filming ended, crew members were still dealing with health problems, relationship difficulties, psychological trauma. Some sought spiritual intervention, priests who performed cleansing rituals, exorcists who attempted to break whatever attachments had formed. Results were mixed. Some felt relief, others continued struggling. The demon house had left scars that weren't easily healed. Zak's decision to destroy the house was controversial in paranormal research circles. Some investigators accused him of eliminating valuable evidence, of preventing scientific study of a legitimately haunted location. Others supported his choice, arguing that some places are too dangerous to preserve, that protecting people mattered more than advancing paranormal research. Zak stood by his decision, said that if he could go back, he'd never buy that house, never investigate it, never expose himself and his crew to what lived there. For years after the demon house investigation, Zak Bagans avoided discussing it in detail. He'd mention it briefly on podcasts, deflect interview questions, keep the conversation surface level, because talking about it, he said, made things worse, brought the memories back too vividly, stirred up whatever connection remained between him and that place. Some investigators who work with the demonic believe that discussing cases can reopen spiritual doorways, can invite entities back into your life. Zak believed that, and he was terrified of what might happen if he spoke too openly about his experiences. But silence came with its own cost. People who followed ghost adventures wanted to know what made the demon house different, why Zak had destroyed it instead of exploiting it, what had happened that was so terrible it made the fearless ghost hunter walk away. The speculation and rumors became so pervasive that Zak realized staying silent was creating more problems than it solved, so he began carefully to open up about the investigation and its lasting impact on his life. In interviews conducted for the documentary release and in subsequent appearances, Zak described the demon house as the most significant and most traumatic investigation of his career. He talked about the physical toll, the permanent damage to his vision, the psychological impact, the nightmares and paranoia that persisted years after filming ended, and the guilt, the overwhelming sense of responsibility for everyone who'd been hurt because he'd bought that house and invited them into its evil. Zak's willingness to discuss his fear, his trauma, his regret was significant. For someone who'd built a brand on fearlessness, on confronting the paranormal without hesitation, admitting that one case had genuinely terrified him was vulnerable. But that vulnerability, he hoped, would serve as warning, would prevent other investigators, amateur or professional, from making the same mistakes he'd made, from thinking they could handle demonic forces without consequences. He's been particularly emphatic about one message. Some places should not be investigated. Some hauntings are not entertainment. When you're dealing with genuinely demonic forces, forces that have the power to possess, harm, and destroy, the risk isn't worth any amount of evidence or any level of proof. The demon house proved to him that the paranormal isn't just about ghosts and cold spots. It can be actively evil, genuinely dangerous, capable of ruining lives. Zak has also spoken about how the investigation changed his approach to ghost adventures and paranormal investigation generally. He's more cautious now about demonic cases, more likely to decline investigations at locations with histories of possession or violent spiritual activity, more protective of his crew, refusing to put them in situations where genuine harm is likely. The demon house taught him that some evidence isn't worth worth the cost of obtaining it, that his responsibility to the people who work with him matters more than capturing compelling television. Years after the Demon House was demolished, years after the documentary was released, Zak Bagans still lives with the consequences of that investigation. His vision problems are permanent. He wears prism glasses every day, a visible reminder of what happened in Gary, Indiana. The nightmares have decreased in frequency, but haven't stopped entirely, and he carries psychological scars that manifest as caution bordering on paranoia when dealing with potentially demonic cases. He's described the Demon House as a warning that he'll carry for the rest of his life, a reminder that the paranormal world contains forces that are genuinely dangerous, that can cause lasting harm to body and mind. That his cavalier approach to investigating hauntings, his confidence that he could handle anything, was arrogance that nearly destroyed him and did destroy the lives of people who trusted him. The case changed how Zak is perceived in the paranormal community. Before the Demon House, he was often criticized as too theatrical, too focused on drama and entertainment. After, many investigators gained new respect for him because he'd encountered something genuinely evil and had the courage to admit it had defeated him, had the integrity to destroy a potentially profitable property rather than exploit it for financial gain, had the honesty to warn others about dangers he'd learned about the hard way. But respect doesn't erase trauma. Zak has admitted in recent interviews that he wishes he'd never heard about the house on Carolina Street, wishes someone else had investigated it, wishes he'd listened to the warnings from people who'd experienced its evil firsthand, wishes he'd valued his health and his crew's safety more than his desire to capture definitive proof of the demonic. Those wishes can't change what happened, can't restore his vision or eliminate the nightmares or undo the harm done to everyone involved, but they represent growth, recognition that some pursuits aren't worth their cost.